Hey there, listeners, and welcome to season 2 of Project Zero. The goal is the same as last year. We're going to hear some of the journeys of the best project leaders in the game. But this season, we're going to lean on in a little bit more on AI. So my name's Alex Tuck, and I'm the host. I am here with Director of Strategic Programs at Scholastic and keynote speaker at Navigate with Purpose, Tyler Norman. Welcome to the podcast, Tyler.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, so Tyler, start us off. Tell us a little bit about yourself and the work you do.
Yeah. As you mentioned, I'm a director of strategic programs with Scholastic Inc., the children's book company that a lot of folks are aware of, and it's kind of a foundational part of the childhood experience. I've been a project manager for 17 years. Spent the first 10 in construction, steel fab, kind of that space, a lot of job sites, and then got into energy for a few years, and now somehow children's books, which is as surprising to me as anyone else. Outside of my day job, I also do quite a bit of event speaking. A couple of years ago, PMI asked me to speak at PM Expo, and I said, sure, that sounds like fun. And then they shared that they had 80,000 people registered, and my heart just about stopped. Evidently, it didn't go too bad because since then I've spoken at 2 PM Expos in total, a couple global summits, and almost 40 PMI local chapters. So it's been a lot of fun, still new enough to it that I'm figuring things out, but it's a blast being able to create connections across all of these chapters.
Awesome. Hopefully you're not nervous right now, the 150 listeners that are going to listen to this podcast. Actually, I assume it's going to be much bigger in the future when everyone binge watches for PDUs. It's going to be much bigger than that. Maybe not 80,000 though. Oh my God. I don't even know what I love talking. I'm actually an introvert, right? That's not fair to say. I'm an ambivert, lean introvert. And getting up on stage is a little stressful for me, but it's energizing, right? But at the end of the day, my battery just, depletes a little bit.
Oh,
and,
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. I'm the extrovertiest of the extroverts. And I still, at some conferences at the end, just lay down and pass out.
Yeah. I love it. I like meeting people and talking to people. It's just how my battery fills up.
Absolutely.
Cool. So talk to me a little bit. Did you do anything before construction PM, or was it straight into construction project management and then into the rest of your journey?
Yeah. I'm one of those rare project managers that actually started in that space. And when we talk about early projects, I'll dig in on that. But I was introduced to the PMBOK and formal project management in my capstone of my undergrad. I had always been a PM prior to that and didn't really know it. I did a lot of getting things done, structuring new exciting processes, or, getting things installed or whatever it was. I didn't know I was doing project management, but that's exactly what I was doing. And then got introduced to it formally in my undergrad at the University of Illinois, and kind of had that light bulb moment of, oh, wait, this is what I've done in the past and exactly what I want to do. So from there, went into steel fabrication, tiny shop, and actually started as an estimator. So I lied a little bit. That's project management adjacent, but I was going out and selling work. And then I found that setting up the project manager for as much success as possible just made my job easier as an estimator. And I had to do less work down the road to unwind issues. And that naturally led into, if you're doing the pre-con and the setup for the project, why not just run it? And then went from estimating management into project management, eventually bigger projects. I lived in Charlotte, North Carolina for a few years before coming back to the St. Louis area where I'm from, and super high volume apartments, lots of high rises, big apartment buildings, a little bit of commercial. And then, after that, like I said, went into energy, and it was still construction adjacent, started getting into the IT space. And now I sit at Scholastic in our supply chain PMO, but kind of at the apex of technology and engineering, working on major transformational programs like putting robotics in warehouses, updating technology stacks, and a lot of the change management that comes with that.
Interesting. So what was it like though to go from construction that's like, we don't even do construction project management because it takes such a specific skill set. Like, what was it like to go from these physical things? I guess IT can still be physical, but to go from you're building these things and to you're building these theoretical things that are connected through software. Talk to me about that a little bit.
Yeah, obviously there's differences across industries, and construction to IT is a very significant shift that I took a few incremental milestone steps to get to. But at the end of the day, project management is project management. If you know how to take ambiguous concepts and turn it into a definitive problem and scope statement, if you know how to align stakeholders on a vision, how to execute the tactical steps in project management, it's really a little bit all the same. You have your unique nuances, and I'm definitely not recommending that you can plug and play. There's always going to be a little bit of a learning curve, but if you have the foundational skill set and are willing to take the time to learn a new industry, it's really not, I like to say getting hired in a new industry is considerably harder than actually getting up to speed in a new industry, as long as you have those foundational skills.
That's such a good, like, amazing call out. Like, everyone that's hiring, like every PMO lead is like looking for someone with that industry experience. And honestly, I think the PMO leads or the directors, the COOs, whatever, that are willing to take a chance with a PM who doesn't necessarily have industry expertise, but like transferable skills, I think you're going to get so much more value out of it. And I try to tell people that, it's not plug and play, to your point, but you just have to appreciate, you have to find the person that can learn quickly. And so you went into Scholastic and learned IT, and completely different ballgame.
Yeah.
Cool stuff. Cool stuff. Let's talk about your Project Zero, right? And so for the listeners at home who haven't listened to the show before, Project Zero is sort of that, not necessarily the very first project you did. It could be your very first project, but it's usually that project where, you went from, I'm a PM or I'm doing project management stuff, to like, oh, wow, that's what project management is. Like, I negotiated with an executive leader to like make this change, or I advocated for a developer who was overworked, or I figured out how to manage risk better. And, that's sort of the concept of this Project Zero. And we use that as like the anchor for each of our shows. So Tyler, tell us about your Project Zero.
Yeah. So in my 17 years of professional experience, I've gotten to do some really interesting, cool projects, some big buildings, removing the interior of a historical church and putting back structure underneath, some awesome stuff. For my Project Zero, I'm actually going to talk about a project that I'm going to ask you to stay with me a little bit, because it's a pretty boring project. What's interesting about it is when it happened and how it influenced my journey, and how it made me realize that project management skills are just foundational, get things done skills.
Okay.
So I'm going to go way back in time. I'm not going to get too specific and age myself, but let's just say way back in time. So I grew up in a tiny town in Southern Illinois outside St. Louis. And from the time I was 15 to 18, I worked at, I can only lovingly say, a crummy little small town bar and grill. And that's the most accurate way I can describe it. And while I was there, I would, I was a young guy, get put on the fryer on the end, go deal with the crummy job. And I would always become the bottleneck. And it was borderline traumatizing. I would lay down at night and hear that ticket machine, because on a Friday and Saturday night, we would be so far behind that people walking up, they would, our hostess would say we're an hour or two behind on food, and they'd turn and walk away. And it was me on that single fryer down at the end. And I had no idea what I was doing, but I had this spark of, there's got to be something we can do here. So I, did what a 15-year-old does. And I went to the owner and complained and brought a solution forward. And the owner said, what do you want me to do here? And I realized, let's start to think about how much we're losing and people walking away. And we started to, all I did was ask the hostess, start marking how many we lose on a Friday night. And I didn't realize it, but I was starting to create a problem statement. And, getting specific about, we've got an issue down here. And I'll skip ahead a little bit here, but essentially I worked with the group in the kitchen and said, if we had a second fryer, what would that do? And we realized removing that as a bottleneck could have some value. So made a couple phone calls, figured out what it would cost, and brought forward to the owner what I had no idea what to call it, but a justification, a business case for, yes, it's going to cost money, but if we get this second fryer, we think we won't lose as many tables on a Friday night. And here's the revenue. And, look, it would pay back in 3 months. And, it was much uglier than that. It was a lot more napkin math, but we were building a business case, scan ahead, working with a contractor to get it installed, confirming the before and after, the benefits realization. And my light bulb moment that made me realize what I was doing was actually project management was, I think I shared before we came on air, I was introduced to all this in college. And when I had those moments of learning what an actual business case was and learning what benefits estimation and actualization is, I realized, oh, wait, that's exactly what I did. I didn't know what to call it. I had no idea what I was doing. It was ugly. I'm sure I made a million mistakes, but I was acting as a project manager, and it lit this spark that became a lot of what I talk about today in my sessions with chapters, that project management skills are simply skills in getting things done. And it's something that I think we all intrinsically know how to be project managers. We just may not have a fully developed toolbox. So
I
I'll
love
pause
that.
there.
Yeah. Oh, Tyler, that was not boring at all. It brought me back to that same fryer. And I was a couple of years older and I was actually running the whole snack bar. But yeah, it's like, that resonates so much with me. As you were telling that story, I'm like, oh, how do you make this better? And wow, what a good lesson. And it's very cool. I want to talk a little bit about sort of your education, college, because not a lot of people that work in project management actually got PM courses at all, right? And so
Mhm.
at a very young age, like if you didn't have that experience, like you might not have even been able to draw the bridge between like project management being exactly what you did there. So like, how much was project management a part of your course load and what did you study?
Yeah, yeah. Strangely enough, I studied in the School of Agricultural Engineering. From a small town, went to the University of Illinois, where that was pretty highly ranked, and it made sense. And I wasn't actually, I mean, project management was alluded to in a lot of the undergrad courses at the University of Illinois, but I didn't really have a structural, here's how to do it, and here's the actual knowledge base for project management until the capstone course of my undergrad. And it was actually based on the Project Management Institute PMBOK a few editions ago. Again, won't get too specific, but a few editions ago, to say the least. And that was the only true project management course in my undergrad, which, as you're alluding to, a little bit shocking to me. I have said to some folks that work at universities around the St. Louis area, I can't believe it's not required curriculum for just about any undergrad degree. So that was really the first time in my capstone of my undergrad. Since then, I did an MBA a few years later, and there was a dedicated course for that. And I've done 6 now of the PMI certs. So clearly I haven't learned my lesson yet, because I'm actually working on number 7. But yeah, I think what you're hinting at there, that it's not as prevalent in undergrad learning as you would expect, even for people that work outside of project management. That's been my experience.
Yeah, for sure. Which one are you working on? PGMP?
So I've got, and I'll go in order of how I got them. I got the
Okay.
PMP, ACP, PBA. The PBA is a hidden gem. That's actually one of, if not the least earned, but it's all about business analysis, and it feeds really well into all the other facets. And then I went for PGMP, PFMP, and PMO certified practitioner, another hidden gem. The
Yeah.
PGMP, I found it to be the hardest and also the most valuable. When people say if I wanted to get one, that's often the one I recommend. But I'm now going for the CPM AI. I've
Oh
gotten
yeah.
tapped in my day job to get involved with our AI Center of Excellence and help drive that across the org. So CPM AI is where I'm focused now.
That's awesome. I am also in the middle of my CPM AI. The listeners will know that I've been talking about the CPM AI for the past 6 months, but it's going to happen soon. I'm going to focus on it. And I tell everyone this, like the first 4 hours, like even if you didn't take the exam, the first 4 hours, like that foundation in the curriculum for the CPM AI, I lovingly like to give PMI a hard time about all the certifications, right? But this one's great. Like I just such a cool foundation. If you don't know anything about AI, or if you know some things about AI, there's still stuff to learn in it.
Absolutely. I've sent quite a few coworkers and friends to the smaller bite-sized learning that PMI has on AI. I think they're up to 6 or 7 courses, and those can be a little bit of a more bite-sized chunk if folks want to dip their toes into that world.
Yeah, I love it. So talking AI, let's do it, right? Like
Yep.
it wouldn't be a podcast in 2026 if we didn't talk about AI, right?
Yeah.
Where are you seeing AI be most helpful in project management right now.
Yeah. Yeah. So I put it in two buckets. There's the big, shiny, get excited about this use case. And then there's the tactical blocking and tackling. So I'll kind of tackle both separately. Some of the more exciting things are workflows around, meeting recordings, an obvious one, but a lot of folks don't take it a step further and say, let's parse out all the requirements from that recording. Let's integrate that with our requirements traceability matrix. I see a lot of folks taking that first step of the meeting recording, but then not realizing, okay, I've got the information in there in a digital format in the transcription. Now, how can I manipulate that information? So a ton of potential there. I think organizations in a general sense are looking at chatbots for customers, kind of those big, shiny, harder to implement. Truthfully, where I see the most value right now and where I spend the most time myself and also coaching others is the simple, dumb stuff, for lack of a better term. Things like if you ever receive an email from me that's more than about 2 sentences, I dictated it to my mic and had Copilot write it. And that voice thing seems like it's not a big difference, but it's a big difference between typing it up as a prompt to Copilot and dictating. For some reason, it removes friction. So for me, I'm constantly talking to my mic saying, write an email to this person, break this news, ask for this thing. So just the email dictation is a huge time saver for me. Also, just easy little things, Excel manipulation. So I use Copilot within Microsoft Teams apps. A lot of people that use the Microsoft suite, they have Copilot in Excel, Word, PowerPoint, little things. As a project manager, I make a lot of decks. So being able to open my slide template and say, I need a deck conveying this message. On slide 1, put this, slide 2, put this, slide 3, put this. And it just makes the easy things so exceptionally easy. And I'm probably getting back anywhere from 12 to 20 hours a week in small administrative stuff. And I think the key there is it's fun to automate the administrative stuff, but where the real value comes is now I can spend my same so ever many hours a week focused on the highest value activities. Whereas I used to have a hard time keeping up with all the sponsors of my projects and making sure that I'm giving them face time and hearing about their concerns. Now I can dedicate time there because I'm not spending my time knocking PowerPoints together and building Excel formulas and, checking bugs and that stuff. Automating all the easy stuff is so key. I think the last thing I'll mention is there's a workflow I'm using a lot now of using Copilot for the web and saying, I'm trying to solve this problem. Here are the AI tools in front of me. And it will give me back, oh, I can give you a prompt and you can drop it into Excel. Oh, you can build an agent and link it to these 2 sources of information. So what I'm finding is when I'm training folks in AI and they say, I don't know how to recognize AI opportunities, go to one and say, here's the most common activities in my day. What can I automate? And then go from there and build workflows. So I'll put a fine point on that rambling mess of a narrative and say, the big shiny stuff's important and we should absolutely go after that because that's where big benefits often lie. But it's the easy, ugly stuff where I'm finding a ton of value right now, both in my own work and in others that I work with.
Yeah, I love that point. Like one of my favorite uses of Copilot, because none of my other agents or connectors work the same as using Copilot in Microsoft, but I color code. You probably do this too. Like I color code and categorize every single block of every single hour of every single day.
Yep.
Probably look like a crazy person, but like it works for me, including all my personal stuff. And so then at the end of the week, I just ask Copilot to block everything together, summarize how much time I spent in each of those categories. And I track that time so that I understand like where I'm spending time. And it's just, we couldn't have done that. There's no way we could have done that before. But then to your point, it's like, all right, now I can take that stuff and see where I'm spending time. And then when 10%, 20%, 30% of my time is being spent doing X, that's where I focus on what to automate next or what to implement with AI.
Yeah, absolutely. And 2 years ago, 5 years ago, heck, 18 months ago, maybe, if you tried to perform that exercise, it becomes pen and paper, trying to log your time, and the juice is not worth the squeeze. Now it's all intrinsically built in. And I think what's also beautiful is you can expand that beyond just yourself to your teams. One workflow I should have mentioned is I've got a handful of PMs in major programs that I'm responsible for their work. And now, instead of having to sit on meetings or ask them to escalate things when appropriate, which they did a pretty good job, but everybody's human and things slip through the cracks. Now they manage all their meetings with me following, and I get a bullet point summary at the end of the week. And I say, flag potential scope risks, flag potential budget risks. And it pulls out on this, in this meeting on this day, the PM said, yeah, we can probably do that to this function that's not in your base assumptions, that all those enables you to cover, I'm sure your calendar looks like mine. And there are times where you've got 4 meetings and you go, how do I get to 4 places at the same time? And it enables you to be in 4 places at the same time from a decision-making perspective.
Oh yeah, that's such a good one. And along the same lines, right? Like I'm sure you read the Anthropic report. And it's like, all right, like here are all the different roles that exist in an organization, and here's where AI has penetrated the work in those spaces, and here's where we think it can go, the potential for AI deployment. And if you look in the 2 areas for project management where we would fall, one is the management modal, and then one is the administrative piece, right? And what we're seeing, like what the study says, we think about 90% of all admin work can be replaced by AI eventually. About 25-30% of it has been replaced already. And if you look at the management, it's 80-85% can be replaced, and only about 5 or 10% is actually replaced, because managers are making the decisions. So they probably won't get replaced for a while. But you think about that, right? And that's where I like to live. I see that gap as opportunity as a consultant and as someone that tries to always stay ahead. But a lot of people are scared. I interviewed 2 people in the past 2 days who got laid off, like both PMs. And it's, whoa, what is happening right now? So the industry, we're starting to see this like impact on the industry, this fear that's created. What do you think? Is this all just noise, or do you think like the industry is going to be impacted?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of noise. I'm not an economist, so I'll make this short, but I think we're coming out of a lot of deficit spending at the back of the pandemic. And if I'm a CEO, do I want to get up in front of people and say I overhired or my industry's in trouble, or do I want to say I'm innovating with AI? I'll just leave it at that. So I think AI is being blamed for a lot of greater business context, but in terms of what that means for the actual human being, I think we're going to be okay in the long term, but the interim may be challenging. And again, that gets into macroeconomics and even potentially politics. But when we look at greater technology shift in the past, you look at huge percentages of the country worked in agriculture, and then there were entire typing pools and, things along those nature. There's lots of examples of this. I think it always tends to normalize in the long term. We will have new jobs. The jobs won't look the same, but there will be meaningful, gainful employment in the long term. I think the short term may be a little bit bumpy for a lot of factors outside of just AI growth, but it may be a little tough in the interim. What I think a person can do about that is, first and foremost, continue to learn. And that's true during times when change is not so explosive. It's especially true now. And you can't, there's not one thing you can say is important to learn, because if I gave an answer, by the time you air this, it'll be too late. And then 2 weeks later, it'll be legacy done. But the key is to continue to learn. And then I think the other piece that is happening, kind of building on your initial question, is PMs who are focused on the tactical are at the biggest risk right now. If what you do is primarily focus on scheduling management, that would fall into that administrative bucket we were just chatting about. So I think one of the most important things an individual PM can do right now is understand business context and tie your work to business value. Don't identify yourself and communicate your value as I'm a smart sheet or a ClickUp or a Jira whiz. That work's important, but is it still going to be here in a few years? I'm not sure. in a few years, I can guarantee we will still need project leaders that can organize big groups around common business value pursuit and help leaders make decisions around their investments and all those other pieces that go beyond the tactical. I took that and ran with it in a different direction than your initial question, but hopefully that was helpful.
Oh my God, Tyler, I was going to ask you the follow-on question of, what can these PMs do? So you nailed it without me even asking you. Taking it a little bit wider for a second. This is an impossible question to ask, or to answer, but I like to ask it anyway. What do you think's the most important skill for a project manager to have?
Yeah. And I like answering impossible questions because I can start with, in my opinion, and then I'm off the hook. In my opinion, I see the tactical as almost table stakes. So I'm not going to call it the most important. I think PMs need to have, yes, the schedule management, the cost management, the meeting notes, all the blocking and tackling. But I think what is the most important skill and what separates okay project managers from highly skilled project managers is, I'll start simple and build on it, empathy. I think, and empathy in its true definition, not just being a nice person, being able to understand the viewpoints, the motivations of the people you interact with. I think the difference between a good PM and a great PM is being able to prepare for a discussion with a group of diverse stakeholders and walk in knowing the person from this group is going to have this concern and they're going to be worried about this. The person from this group isn't going to be as concerned about the risk. They want to know what's going to happen for the end customer, and being able to organize teams that all come in with their own viewpoints and concerns and hidden agendas and motivations, and be able to align those teams towards common goals. So I think it all comes back to, we used to call them soft skills. They're not soft skills. They're important, highly determinant of your success, people skills and stakeholder management. So I started with empathy. I'll make it a little bit more, put a finer point on it. I think the stakeholder management and understanding of business context is the most important skill.
Yeah, I nailed it. It's something in that space, especially as you think about how AI and automation and things like that start to take over some of those tactical things that you were describing, Tyler. It's that ability to play in the middle, right? And help the executive understand that, yes, this dev team needs more time, right? Because you want higher quality. And to create that higher quality, they need more time. We can't just push this thing out, or vice versa, right? It's so important. It's like the number one skill that I look for in all of my PMs is that ability to communicate, like negotiate, influence. Love it. Love it. Tyler, if you were to give little Tyler a little bit of advice that was sometime in the past, right? What would you give just from a career standpoint or a PM career standpoint? What do you think you would change?
Yeah. And I'm going to give two answers. The first is, find the best project manager in your business and grab onto their coattail and hold tight. Find the person who is where you want to be in 5 to 10 years. And I would say ask to take their meeting notes, but they're using AI for that. Ask to prepare meeting agendas, ask to record, ask to sit in the room and smile and say nothing. Figure out how you can follow around those people who are exceptional at what they do and who you can learn from. That's kind of a day one. Beyond that, I would say acknowledge that you are a total person and that you cannot operate in silos. So one thing I talk about a lot and layers into some of the speaking I do is, early in my career, I was killing it in the workplace and the exact opposite outside. I'll make it short and sweet and say, when I was in commercial construction, people I'd never met before would come to my company and ask to work with the Yankee, because I was in the Southeast. I'd never been called a Yankee before, but everything's contextual, right? Meanwhile, I was unbelievably unhealthy. I was, neglecting my then girlfriend, now wife, in terms of dedicating enough time to spending time with her. And eventually, got to a point and got some good advice. The fire's burning bright, but it's going to go out eventually, and started thinking more in terms of my health, my family, my long-term learning. So yeah, I would say learn as much as you can from great people and think about yourself and your success holistically and about you as a total person.
Tyler, I love it. I knew we had the same values, but like that second piece of advice, everyone listened to. Doesn't matter if you're a project manager or anything. Like, it is so easy to not take care. I had the same thing, Tyler, different story, same thing. And yeah, you are a complete person. I love that piece of advice. It's a great one to end on. Tyler, how can people get in contact with you?
Yeah, LinkedIn is the easiest. Tyler Norman on LinkedIn. And then I also have a website that serves as a hub of event speaking, a little bit of podcasting, and spoiler alert, a book coming this fall. That is navigatewithpurpose.com. And you can also get there from my LinkedIn.
Awesome. Tyler, thank you so much for all the stories, all the great advice. I knew you would crush it with all this amazing advice and all the stories. And you actually told what you thought was a very boring story, but like it's a story that connected with me. And I know it's going to connect with all of those folks out there that have worked in the service industry. So thank you, Tyler.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Alex. I enjoyed it.
All right. And thanks to everyone who's at home listening to this, to Project Zero. Be sure to subscribe to Project Zero wherever you get your podcasts, and we will catch you next time with another great project leader story.